Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuffs. A really cool little review for you guys from the brand Electra watches. They're a French revival brand that just was recently brought back in 2024 and was originally founded back in the late 1960s. They're now combining Swiss movements and French assembly to create this awesome dive watch. Some key characteristics and design when you're looking for a diver. Of course, you want to find water resistance, typically with some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is their Daredevil diver in the emerald green colorway, and it's deriving its name from the 660-foot water resistance, depth rating, and this retro-inspired Skindiver offers vintage styling with modern build quality and a super useful 12-hour traveler's bezel. These are going to go for €599 direct. Big thank you to Electra for sending this sample unit in for review. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys. Now, this is one that I haven't really seen a lot of coverage for. I mean, yeah, it's a newer revival, but I think it has a lot going for itself, especially in this green colorway. There actually are a couple of different color options available. For me, this green colorway, this emerald green, was the one that spoke to me the most. And I'm not a huge fan of green, honestly, but they were doing a lot of playful kind of tone-on-tone colorizations where, you know, blue dial would have a hint of kind of day tinted blue lume, which for me was a little heavy-handed, but I think in this green colorway, it works really, really nicely. In terms of dimensions, it comes in at 38 millimeters in diameter, 12.9 millimeters thick, and that's including the crystal. It has a 47.2 millimeter lug-to-lug stainless steel, mostly brushed with some nice high polished accents. Actually, let me give it a quick little wipe here off camera. Check that out. Very nice. Look at that transition. Really lovely brushing in general on here. The fit and finish is quite substantial. You guys can see that that chamfer, that bevel actually comes down over the front of the lugs as well, which I think is a really nice little detail. And you guys can see when I have it at this angle, check out how thin that looks. That is very nice. Of course, when you get it fully kind of side swept there, you can see the case back protruding. But the nice thing is you're getting a nice differentiation between the bezel on top, the crystal, and then the case back. So it keeps that side kind of mid-case profile very thin. And you can see also, you know, very nice curvature to it as well. So that's going to equal really great fitment. Now, getting into some more details here, you're getting a boxed sapphire and with an inner AR coating. You're getting a 12-hour bezel, so you can see here. Also, it's friction fit, not too loose, not too tight. So that's pretty nice. You're not going to accidentally knock it, and you can definitely line it up as well as you know, you're going to want it to. So it's very easy, essentially. You know, if you're changing time zones, that's, you know, a place that's 2 hours ahead. There you go. You're going 3 hours ahead, 4 hours ahead. There you have it. And then when you come back, boom. So it's really nice to be able to do something like that, and makes it very useful and versatile, of course, outside of just using it as a dive timer. Now, the crown is screwed down and nicely signed. I mean, the logo is very clean. You can see it on the back as well as applied on the dial, which is very, very cool. Now, when we get to the back side, although let me actually give it another quick wipe here. You know, a little bit of a polished area there, but still very, very nice. Inside is going to be the Swiss Automatic Soprod PO24, which is going to be pretty comparable to an ETA 2824. It's going to have a 38-hour power reserve and beat at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour. And I believe these are actually tuned to plus or minus 2 seconds a day by basically, you know, one of the best movement manufacturers in France. Now, although this is not a French movement, essentially the process of getting everything dialed in is done in France, and they're able to get it to an extremely tight tolerance. So plus or minus 2 seconds per day is really outstanding. And yeah, you know, although you can't see the movement, there's not much to it. Even if you could see it, it's just one of those things. But this looks really great. I dig it. You can see various finishes, various kind of levels to it. I think it's very nicely stamped. And then of course you do have a little bit of light etching there as well. Now, getting to the dial, you kind of get that beautiful sun ray, fumé set up there with these applied indices, which look great. You're getting a polished hour and minute hand, as well as a painted seconds hand, which all kind of goes again with that green theme. You're also going to get the lume that's being used here is unspecified, but it does glow green, and it is relatively potent. And then, of course, it does offer you that 660 foot water resistance, or 203 meters. Now you're going to get a 20 millimeter lug here, and it is a boxed lug. So when you do put on different straps, you don't have to worry as much about open gaps, which is nice. I do feel like the strap, as nice as it is with its FKM construction and a nice 2 millimeter taper down to 18, it does feel a little bit juxtaposed to the more retro design of the watch itself, where this feels a little bit more modern. And, you know, that could be what they were going for. But for me, I think, you know, as much as this is great from a wearability standpoint, I think stylistically and thematically, you know, you're probably going to want to swap this out to something like a nice black tropic style strap, or even a, you know, a black sailcloth, and maybe really elevate this. And it's going to look great, especially with those boxed lugs there. So yeah, this thing looks cool, but actually let's just get it on the wrist now and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, I think this wears really, really well. Look at the details on here. Very nice. That bevel is fantastic. The overall silhouette, I mean, definitely right in line with what you would think of for a Skindiver from, you know, that 60s era. And I think it looks really, really great. Of course, more of a pop of color like you might have seen in the 70s. But I think it all comes together for a beautiful retro design. You can see it sits beautifully and wraps around the wrist quite nicely. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get a fair amount of perspective distortion, and it's going to make the watch seem a lot bigger than it actually is. Now, this is a 38 millimeter diver, so that's typically considered mid-sized for a watch with a turning bezel. But if I keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here, you guys can still get a detailed look, but just, I think, at a better, truer aspect ratio. That's how this may lay on your own wrist. Check that out. All of a sudden now, the watch looks a lot more centered, and you're going to see the sides of the straps a lot more. And it's, you know, although my wrist is slightly larger than average at 7.5 inches, it's still, you know, it's quite tall and round, so it's not like it's really flat and wide and accommodating. So, you know, you might even have a smaller wrist, but, you know, looking top down, it might actually even be wider than mine. But I think this looks great. And you guys can see here, very clean. The bezel teeth there, very nice. I mean, this is just really well executed. Surprisingly well executed. Not that, you know, from the pictures, it didn't look good, but man, I have to say, in the metal, this is way more impressive than I was expecting. I was expecting it to feel a lot more retro, also within its execution. But I will say, in terms of like the execution, it feels way more modern and way more upscale, especially that what you would think for, you know, about $620 US. I mean, depending on the exchange rate, you know, for something like this, I mean, this is pretty elevated in terms of the level of execution. So I appreciate it. I mean, it's still a tool watch. It's still going to be, you know, quite simple, and it's not super overly complex or anything, but the areas where they do the brushing, it actually is a really nice brush. It's not one of those ones where they just drag the brushing across and it has kind of those linear streaks in it. It looks more like they did it on a wheel, so it's just way more refined, and it just has, again, just there's a certain level here. I mean, yeah, to a certain point, hey, brushing's brushing, satin, polish is polish, but we know there's difference in terms of grading, right? Like the grade of a Zaratsu polish, right, or a black polish is going to be much higher than your typical just high polished, right? So yeah, when you have something with distortion-free mirror, like there's more polish there, right? There's more, to the execution. Same for brushing. There can definitely be higher levels of more complex and just overall more refined brushing techniques. And I think they did a great job utilizing them here. I really, really dig this one, guys. Actually, though, let's do this. Let's swap this out to a Tropic rubber strap just to see how it looks, because I will say when I look at it from the side, this profile here, how it's not tapering as dramatically, I think it does kind of make the watch appear a little bit smaller at the head, versus if it tapered, it would basically, by comparison, it would kind of make your eye see this as opening and widening up. Okay, guys, check that out. That more dramatic taper, for me, it just keeps it looking more proportionate. And this is a genuine Tropic strap there, not just a Tropic style. And you can see the level of the finish on that buckle is quite nice. These are not cheap by any means. These are like $80. But I will say, guys, this watch, it feels like it's worthy of that. It's not one of those ones where you're putting a strap that's exorbitantly more expensive than the value of the watch itself. I think it really carries it well. And that, of course, that signature basket weave texturing, I think really adds a lot here in terms of tying in and really solidifying that retro aesthetic. So I think that looks much better. It doesn't look bad on the other strap, but I think this really elevates it and makes it feel a little bit more cohesive thematically as a whole. So actually, before we get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts, why don't I just very quickly get this off and just kind of show you guys, how it looks even off of the wrist with the strap. You can see beautiful flow there, guys. The texturing looks fantastic. And again, I feel like this strap, in this case, they're a worthy match. And these are pretty much the best Tropic straps you can get on the market. They're my favorite. I've tried many other iterations and I don't dislike the other ones, but for me, the level of softness, the level of taper, that level of execution on these is really second to none. So I really, really like these. And I think, again, this watch itself is elevated enough in terms of its execution to where having it on a strap like this really makes sense. I mean, look at the way that signature basket weave texture plays with the light. And then, of course, this whole piece here does a lot when it comes to playing with the light with that sunray dial, as well as that kind of fumé gradation towards the outer reaches. So with that said, let's actually go ahead and get this set up for some Lume shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, look at that. Even the 12-hour markings are actually loomed. So the nice thing is you could use them in terms of orientation in the dark underwater as well, right? I know they're not broken down in 60-second increments, but pretty easy to do the math there, where 1 is equal to 5. So very, very cool. But one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see how these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. You guys can see here the play of Lume, that vibrant green dial. I love that it's not overpowered. Even if I try to blow it out here by just getting as much light onto the dial as possible, thanks to the fumé, and of course the high polished on those applied indices, you're still going to get a lot of contrast, and it's still going to be very, very legible. Then, of course, when you get into the times of darkness, still going to remain very, very legible. So I like that. You even do get the great orientation of being able to read the numerals there on those triangles at the cardinal points of 12, 3, 6, and 9. So Very cool here. The green, guys, I'm not huge on green, but this variation I think works really, really well. And again, very dynamic. As you guys can see, that dial typically just gonna be a little sliver of green. And then if you can really try to blow it out, sure, you can try to, if you can get it directly reflecting off of the more matte sheen of the surface of the texturing there. But yeah, typically it's going to pretty much render as like a black dial with some really, really lively dynamic streaking thanks to the sunray pattern there. So that said, we'll get these back on here going. All right. Guys, closing thoughts on the wrist. Great kind of Seiko 62 MAS like / classic Skindiver wear profile. The strap also wears great, but better suits the other kind of vintage cues when paired with a rubber tropic style strap. It doesn't have to be Tropic brand specifically. It could be a Joseph Bonnie or something like that, or you know, one of the various kind of tropic style basket weave style straps that are out there. I personally prefer this layout here on the genuine Tropic. I think it looks great. Or you could even try to elevate it even more and like put it on this premium sailcloth strap, which I think would look great as well. You know, typically I'd say the black style you got in terms of, you know, sailcloth straps that I really enjoy personally. Say Artem makes some really great ones. I think this would look fantastic on a black Artem loopless sailcloth strap. Or if you have a smaller wrist, you could always do it on one of their Hydroflex. They're not cheap again, but again, at the same time, I will say this watch is finished to a high enough level and looks good enough to where I think you can put expensive straps on this and they're not going to feel out of place at all. I think it's going to flow really nicely. In terms of model variants, definitely check the site links for current options and availability there. I'm hoping they'll continue to make these and continue to, you know, offer some different variations, whether they have a 60-minute timing bezel with clicks or something like that, or, you know, they go full on GMT, or even if they just play with a couple of more subdued color variations, I'd be up for that as well. In terms of comparable models, guys, I really like that well under $1,000, right? At closer to like €6 and some change, just over $600, you know, that €599. They're offering a super tightly regulated Swiss movement in a space where many of its competitors are still offering unregulated Japanese movements. And I don't have any problem with Japanese movements, but I mean, the fact is the Swiss movements cost more, and the fact that they're regulating them to such a tight tolerance, obviously that's not cheap. And I can appreciate that they went that extra mile. There are some great Japanese powered watches that do have, you know, timing tolerances on them, but I mean, they're not going to be plus or minus 2 seconds. So that's, you know, another thing. And if you really want to get into affordable stuff where they're actually adjusting them, you know, a lot of those are going to be NH movements at a lower beat rate. Here you're going to have still that nice 4 hertz beat. So I appreciate that. Now, bottom line for me, guys, at a glance, I think the tone-on-tone color combos did kind of throw me off a bit, but paying closer attention to the details, there's a lot to be impressed with here. I would like to see Electra eventually offer more muted monochromatic variations, maybe a gray or a silver kind of fumé dial, but for now, this green dial variation has absolutely grown on me. So yeah, I think this is really cool. As is, if I was to give it any critiques, it's more just personal preference, right? Which is going to be, hey, like if we could make it with just like more standardized colors, maybe not do the green on green and or the tone on tone for some of the other colorways, and just do something a little bit more simple. You know, which I'm sure at some, you know, it's a trade-off. It's more simple, then it's also more predictable and, you know, more boring. But I think personally, this is a classic enough aesthetic to where you could get by with, you know, just do a black dial with maybe a red seconds hand or something like that. And with, you know, Lume that's going to render white in the daylight, you know, it's maybe some BGW9 or some, you know, X1, you know, grade stuff. And this could be really, really cool. I mean, it is cool as it is, but for me, I guess, you know, again, I'm not big on green. This was the best dial option for me when, you know, I was talking to them about samples. But yeah, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. This definitely grew on me. But yeah, if they, if they send me another email saying they're coming out with a regular black dial, or they're coming out with a gray fumé or silver fumé dial with, more standard lume on it, not tinted lume, but just, it's going to read as kind of daylight white legibility, then I would absolutely be up for it. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.